The presenting sponsor of OnEducation is Participate. Lately, teachers from all over have been working together to find new approaches to provide quality remote education. Participate's sister company, Participate Learning, presents United We Teach, a global gathering place for educators to share distance learning resources as we navigate these strange times. For these resources and more, visit participate.com/oneducation. And I'm like, so what kind of music do you play? And he's like, well, it's kind of, he's trying to describe what...
And then he played you the Coop song. Welcome to On Education, part of the On Podcast Media Network. My name is Mike Washburn.
And I'm Glen Irvin. Friends, we have an awesome pod for you today. We will discuss how changing grading systems can combat racism, whether we should be giving zeros during distance learning, why we should not be going to school 5 days a week any longer, and our guest this week is the president of Games for Change, Susanna Pollack.
So, Glenn, tell me about Car Talk. I don't know anything about Car Talk.
It's just a really famous radio show, and I'm sure that eventually became a podcast. That I think it was popular even where I grew up, which was in El Paso, Texas, and then I grew up high school years in New Mexico. And though it was a radio show about cars, about fixing cars,
okay,
etc.
Yeah.
It really wasn't about that. It was more like a show where you just listened in and then kind of listened to conversations that were going on between these two guys that had this famous radio show. And so anyway, the other day, that's why I thought it was amazing and awesome that there was someone who posted on Twitter that, first of all, it was a really cool way. People have gave us compliments before, which is amazing. Thank you all for your compliments as far as for the show and that you listen and those types of things. But I've never heard anyone quite state what this listener stated, which was, number one, that she was listening to the podcast while driving, and in the back seat, her daughter was listening and said, "What are you listening to?" Teacher Talk
Teacher
or something
Talk
like
Radio.
that. Teacher Talk Radio. And I thought that was amazing. That was amazing. And she also compared us basically to this legendary radio show basically called Car Talk. And so I was like, hey, you know what? We've made it to the big time when we're being compared to those guys, because
I'm going to take it.
Yeah,
I'm taking the W on this one, and I'm just going to...
And even Teacher Talk Radio, I'm like, hell yeah, we'll take Teacher Talk Radio. That's freaking awesome.
I'm fine with it.
Yeah, that's a great descriptor.
Completely fine with it.
Yeah.
Someone else said, our podcast, what is it, that they occasionally learn something new, but it's also just two guys laughing at their own jokes, and I was like, True.
That's very true. Though you might listen in to be able to get something educational, it's more just to listen to us laugh at ourselves and our own funnies that we think are hilarious.
I'd like to think that we're fairly informative.
Sure.
I would also like to acknowledge that I absolutely do laugh at my own jokes, and think I am freaking hysterical. So.
I think I get that from my dad. I laugh all the time about whatever might be, and it's partially a nervous tick, and sometimes it's because I do actually genuinely laughing at things. So it could be both good and bad depending upon the situation. So it could be some bad moments when you're laughing when you shouldn't be laughing.
Sure.
But anyway, that's definitely comes across on the show. So
kind of like all
thank
of
you guys for
2020.
actually listening. Yes, thank you for listening.
2020 is all laughing, even though you shouldn't be laughing.
Well, yes, exactly.
There's a definition of 2020.
Totally. Yes.
So my house has become obsessed.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I shouldn't say my house.
Yeah.
My youngest son is in junior kindergarten and has just discovered Cuckoo Kangaroo.
Yes,
Their
baby.
teacher obviously plays this for them. This is something my wife has known. Listen, I might be the only person in this conversation and who's listening who didn't know who the hell these guys were until a week and a half ago, because it's clear that my wife knew who they were because she was like, oh yeah, I mean, my wife's a kindergarten teacher. She's like, oh yeah, we played this all the time. They're amazing. New words to songs and everything. And Jacob is like jumping on the couches, and like, I'm like, okay, dude, don't jump on the couch. At least get on the floor. So then he gets out on the floor and jumps around on the floor and dances. And then I find out that you know them and that Audrey knows them. And I'm like, what the hell is going on around here that we have not booked these folks on the podcast yet? Someone is dropping the ball, and it's you, my friend.
Well, I never even thought about bringing them on, which I should have the whole entire time. But one of the members of Cuckoo Kangaroo, which, by the way, if you don't know who they are, you should just go right now.
Just go look it up and first of all, go down the rabbit hole.
Listen to the first. I highly recommend. One of the first videos I watched of theirs was Rolling in the Minivan, and if you haven't heard that one, it'll begin the journey down the path of Cuckoo Kangaroo.
Oh my
and
god!
My goodness, you're going to hear so many great hits.
There's that superhero one, and there's one about pizza. That is, and then there's the what is the Popsico?
Yeah, Popsico was the one.
Popsico.
Yeah. It seems Popsico is now. Anyway, let me finish my one thing.
Yeah, do it.
So, one of the members, Brian, of this duo. He was a student teacher at one point in time in his life in the school that I taught at previously to here, so in southeastern Minnesota. And one of my colleagues taught right next to me, and he was a social studies teacher, and Brian was a social studies teacher also for this guy, Mike. And so anyway, we met Brian. I mean, he definitely brought the personality of... the Cuckoo Kangaroo kind of personality into the classroom. So it's super dynamic, fun, very engaging. And he said to us, these older guys, I play music, and I'm like, cool, because I play guitar and I sing, whatever it might be. And I'm like, so what kind of music do you play? And he's like, well, it's kind of, he's trying to describe what.
And then he played you the poop song.
No, they hadn't started doing any of those things yet. I don't even know if they had recorded. They had recorded, I think, maybe a few things, actually, to be honest with you. But they weren't. Yeah,
like they are now.
Yeah, and they were touring a little bit. So he was like, yeah, we tour a little bit, whatever it might be, to these basically, like little places all over the place. And anyway, we listened to their songs and we laughed. It was super fun and funny. And then eventually they came out with Rolling in the Minivan. And that was that's an awesome song and hilarious. And I figured, he's going to go into teaching now. And then this is like a little side project that goes away, whatever it might be. I was very wrong, because just the other day, he was being mentioned and talked about in a long discussion by Ryan Seacrest on his podcast.
No way!
And he is talking about it. We'll make sure we link that tweet, because they have a clip of it for YouTube. And he's talking about that Popsico song, and talking about his kids. They're like, have you heard of... He talks to these two...
What the hell's Ryan Seacrest doing stealing our thunder, by the way?
Oh, dude, it was amazing. He's like, have you heard of these guys, the Cuckoo Kangaroo? I mean, the way he even mentioned it, and then he started singing what you were just singing, the Popsico song, and it was fantastic. I'm just like, oh my goodness, you have
That's how you
just,
know, I guess.
You've just
arrived.
like accelerated the growth tremendously.
That's how you know you've arrived, when you get mentioned on OnEducation.
Oh man, dude. So anyway, we're going to have them on. We will bring them on, and we'll bring on Neil and Brian onto the show, and we want to just talk to us about, the creative process, anything else. If you guys have some great questions to ask them, or if you guys want them to do like a little live thing for,
writing songs
fantastic.
about poops and farts.
Poops and farts, fanny packs, anything, whatever you, yes. So anyway, super fun
So
and interesting.
Cool.
Yes.
I'll tell you, you're not the first person in the last little while that's linked this documentary about the Oregon Trail, and I've seen it come up in my feed a couple times. So I'm gonna promise to watch it between now and next week. So tell us a little bit more about it, because I've only just seen it on social.
It's probably like a 20-minute documentary, so it's not super long, maybe a little bit less than 20 minutes, but it really walks you through the process of how this came to be, and actually how long ago the idea came to fruition, and these educators. There was an educator, and there was a couple of guys who were just super into coding, right? And just like their process of coming up with this, Mike, is freaking awesome. I mean, I just like hearing, an idea that somebody had and said something to the effect of, I'm going to use these dice, and we're gonna recreate the process of going through the Oregon Trail. And he had these ideas in his head, and this guy goes, well, why don't we just go ahead and code it and create it on computers, and he's like, yeah, but I'm doing that like next week, and they're like, we could do it. Oh, dude, it's freaking crazy awesome. And then how that ended up being, how they sold the idea basically to the state of Minnesota, and Minnesota ends up kind of putting out this open forum for any computer company to kind of say who can run this software. Right. It happens to be the Apple IIe that ends up being the winner of it, that could actually run the thing to make it actually work. And then the rest is history. And it's super interesting, very cool. And these guys are very super humble. By the way, they didn't get any of the. They get nothing. So
they get no revenue from all of those T-shirts.
They didn't get any. They don't get anything, man. It's kind of for sure. You got to watch the documentary, because that's
so many people with
that's like their legacy.
Died from dysentery T-shirts.
This is their legacy, and they've not made any revenue off of it. But they got to tell the story. I guess that's an awesome thing, and it's a really cool, interesting thing as far as how far back people were thinking of game-based learning and making it happen in schools. It's freaking awesome. So if you have 20 minutes to spare, check it out, because I highly recommend it. I'm going to
watch it as soon as we're done here. We'll link it in the show notes
for
too.
Sure. For sure.
So that you can go check this out. The next thing on our little list here is, so we've talked about schools in San Diego before.
Yes.
And they seem to have this, like, I don't know if it's a unified personality where they think outside of the box a little, but certainly they're not afraid to do things that are a little abnormal. And what's funny is that this changed. So the San Diego Unified School District is removing grades, changing their grading system from a marks, like an A, B, C, D percentages grade, to a mastery-based system. And, the irony is obviously that, a lot of educators talk about doing that, and never do it.
No.
It's just one of those things that, people love to talk about at conferences, that people love to bring up on Twitter. But, when push comes to shove, they don't actually do it. And so we wanted to bring this up because the whole school district, it's the second largest school district in California, San Diego Unified School District, and they're doing it across the board. And this quote, if we're actually going to be an anti-racist school district, we have to confront practices like this that have gone on for years and years. It's you're going to hear from Victoria Thompson a little bit later, and she's going to say almost the exact same thing, that there's talking about doing things, and then there's doing things.
Absolutely.
And I say this, anyone who knows me knows I say this all the time too, is that I'm just done with people talking about doing stuff. Let's actually, do stuff. And this is doing stuff, and they're doing it because people of color are disproportionately victims of this type of grading system. They're doing this to combat racism.
Absolutely. And I mean, they have the statistics to prove it. We know that this is happening. We know it has happened. We also know, too, and we've talked about this on the show, that the way that we grade this ABCDF system, it's just not the right thing. It's not, for so many reasons, but here's one big reason, is that it fails all of our minority students, even more than anything else.
Yeah.
But if it was just that reason, but there's many more. It's just not a good system. And it was based, if you go back to the history of it, it was made to rank people. So it was never made so that you would go ahead and, they talk about the bell curve or those types of topics, where you wanted to have the majority of students in that C range, It was never made so that you could get everybody past the finish line. I think Dr. Haskell used to say that all the time. Let's show you where the finish line is. What do you actually need to be able to do, when you leave this class, or even leave the specific unit you're on? Like, what do you need to demonstrate, and give you an opportunity and the time to master that content? And we just don't do that. It was never intended to do that specific thing. And they talk about, the things, not only are they going to change the ABCDF system, base it on mastery, but they're going to change the things, which we'll talk about in just a little bit too. I mean, we could bring that into this topic too. Talking about things like when you turn in assignments late, or just giving the concept of giving zeros for late assignments and so on and so forth.
Right.
Removing all of those things and saying, okay, where were you at to start with? How much did you grow? And did you actually master this specific learning and to what level, and what did you master? It's way more complex, but it's also way more authentic as far as a learning thing. And we talk about it all the time when we reflect on video games, because video games do this really well. You may become the master and dominate and get every achievement ever, right? But very few people end up doing that and still feel a sense of achievement in the game, because you do these certain things, and it shows you how you're growing and progressing as far as in the game itself, and you can finish the game, finish the course, finish the thing, and feel a sense of achievement. Could you go over and above and beyond? Absolutely. Why not? You could also go ahead and do that. And in order to do this, it's really complex, and that's why people talk about it a lot. But we need to go ahead and start making changes like this. This is a systemic change. Like and that's really where it starts happening. If the whole system says, nope, we're not doing that anymore, we need to figure out a better way of doing this. We're going to demonstrate learning through mastery. Now let's fill in the gaps. How does that work? What does it look like on a day-to-day basis? Like, how do you do this? If you have those conversations throughout a district, in this case, the second largest school district behind basically the LA school district in California, that's freaking awesome. That's huge headway. And we can learn a lot then from not only their decision there, but whatever happens next. That's what I'm really curious of seeing, is how do they go about basically doing the professional development so their teachers know how to do this and make this a successful thing, and inform their parents and community and so on. So I thought it was a great article. Make sure that we shared it with our audience.
Yeah, totally. Our friend Mayor posted a tweet, little hot takey maybe, and we'll link it in the show notes, but it says, unpopular opinion: kids don't need to attend class 5 days a week with a teacher in order to learn. And I am not sure where you land on this, and we haven't talked about this yet. I've been tempted to actually text you about it all day, but I resisted because I wanted the surprise of hearing your thoughts on this. And I shockingly prepped my thoughts a little bit, but I want to hear your thoughts first, because you posted it.
Yeah,
and I'm super interested in what your thoughts are.
I have a couple of thoughts. Number one, the concept of the 5-day week. We've talked about it also on the show previously. Where does it actually come from, and why do we actually have it still in place? And really, it's obvious. It's even last week when we were talking about the election and so on and so forth, and Trump's rallies, and he talks about we need the kids in school. It's not that we need the kids learning in school. That could be also a thing, but we need kids in school. It's because we need a place for kids to go so that parents can work. And we've seen that through what happened this spring, and even what's happening right now in still many states where they still are going distance learning and trying to figure out how do you supervise your kids safely? How do you keep them safe at their home and you still go to work? How do you do that? How do you make that happen? Anyway, the 5-day week is antiquated, absolutely, and I have a couple of opinions about it. I've advocated for a 4-day week because I worked at a 4-day week school in Colorado, and I thought it was amazing. And I actually felt rested by the time that I came back to class that following Monday because we had Fridays off. And I'm a 100% supporter of that type of a system. And I thought my kids felt excited again to be able to go in and come back after having this 3-day week. And we did a lot of other things on that Friday. We had professional development days quite a bit. So we really got a lot of professional development and really grew as educators because we had the time to be able to do that. We had time to be able to go ahead and create awesome lesson plans, to be able to grade assignments and give good feedback. It's all important. I also wanted to go ahead and state, though, that the 5-day week still needs to be an option for many of our students because schools for many of our students are the safest place for them. They are the place where they may get 2 meals per day that they may not have gotten in otherwise, a breakfast and a lunch as far as in U.S. schools. It's also a place where they may feel not only the friendships that they develop with their peers, but also I would call it the love, basically, that teachers basically feel for them and the interactions, the positive interactions that they're having. It could be the most positive place that they have on a daily basis. And some of our students are most vulnerable learners. I'm talking about English language learners or our students who are receiving special education services. I think that we still need to have that available for them. So it's a pretty blanket statement. 5 days a week, we don't need to attend for class 5 days a week. I like the way she actually phrased that because she says you don't need to attend. You're right. A lot of the times, especially at high school level, I think that's super antiquated. I think our high school students can start making transitions towards a modified hybrid type of schedule. And then they can we've talked about it also on the show, they can get some experiences outside of the school, mentorships that they can go in and get some opportunities to work in some places that they may not have otherwise, or volunteer. And you can only do that if you expand and move, kind of have the flexibility in a type of schedule to be able to do those kinds of things. And they do that already in a lot of schools, but it's far and few between. Many of us still do an 8 to 3 o'clock schedule because it's easy to plan. It's easy for logistics. It's easy for our parents. And if we start being able to move kind of away from those things and learn from what have been learning, kind of what can we do? The technology, we've got that part. The pedagogy, we're still working on it to make sure that it's sound pedagogy of being able to do a hybrid approach. But it's a really, really good conversation that I hope doesn't end, when all of this is over. I hope, like you just talked about before too, Mike, with all these other topics, I hope this isn't just a topic right now. I hope it's something that we're like, we've learned a lot. We can start making these types of changes, these systemic changes, for the good of all of us, the communities, especially our students. So that was a super long answer. Sorry.
I think it's great. I think you're awesome. I think that's exactly. It's not actually. I didn't know what you were going to say, but I'm glad you landed where you did because I think that makes a lot of sense to me. This is one of those conversations that cannot be summarily dismissed. There are a lot of ideas about doing education differently than we're doing now. Some of them are crazier than others. This is not a crazy idea. It just sounds crazy to like a certain subset of people that, you know, love controlling, you know, populations and the workforce and, you know, that kind of stuff. It's only really crazy to them. Those are the only people that would be super up in arms about this. And it could be educators who absolutely just love the fact that they can exert, you know, their kind of authority over students, because any other, you know, I would be disappointed in you as an educator if you weren't willing to at least entertain the possibility that there could be other better ways to teach students than the way we're teaching them now. Okay. And case in point, and the first thing I thought of when this came up on our outline was an amazing thread that is sort of related from not much longer ago, just like a week or so ago, by a fellow named David Bowles. Okay. And he wrote, and this first sentence or two blew my head off my shoulders when I read it. Okay. I had never. I'm setting this up because when I read *Sapiens* for the first time, and Noel Yuval Harari's book about kind of the history of humans. Okay. And one of the first things that he talks about in *Sapiens*, and everyone should go read *Sapiens*. It's mind-blowing. He writes that everything is a story. Everything in all of humanity is just something we've made up. Okay. You know, it's true, though, when you think about currency is actually one of his really great examples. You know, we decided to print pictures on pieces of paper and then determine that those pieces of paper were worth something. That's a story that we've created and that we collectively agree to. We agree that these papers have value, and when I give you a paper, you give me a thing. Yes. Okay? And
so
that,
weird, huh?
You know, that is a great example. And language is another classic example. You know, all it really is a bunch of characters that, you know, in the beginning, someone just bashed them out on a rock, but then said, this is the way we're going to talk and write from now on. And everyone wrote, and everyone went, yeah, all right, sounds good. Let's do it. Right? And so it became the way that they did things. They settled on a story. They settled on an idea. Okay. That mindset, I kind of felt that a little bit when he wrote, I have a doctorate in education, but the field is basically just 100 years old. We don't really know what we're doing. Our scholarly understanding of how learning happens is like astronomy 2,000 years ago. I think that is the best opening sentence in a thread that I've ever heard. And he is 100% right. We barely know how to teach people. In the history of humanity, organized education has only been happening for a couple hundred years at the most.
We sure pretend, though, Mike, that we know, huh?
Oh my God!
We like to use a lot of words like
ed tech conference, and you'd think that we've been teaching for
best
thousands of years.
Pedagogy.
Right? The truth is, we don't know jack about this in the grand scheme of things. We have 2 to 4 generations max of educated citizenry who have went through, you know, education as we kind of know it today.
Yeah. When you say it that way, a lot of things actually are starting to make sense.
2 to 4 generations. Like your great-great-grandparents, if your great-great-great-grandparents probably didn't go to school.
That's crazy, huh?
2 to 4 generations max of people with real, organized, formal education. We don't know anything in the broad sense. So to summarily dismiss ideas like this is just stupid. And, you know, to think that you might know better because you've taught in a classroom for 10 years, you know, is just, I mean, you got to have some balls to say that because, again, we don't know anything. We don't know anything about this. We
like
think
that.
we do, and we pretend we do. And, you know, the field is always evolving, always changing. We're always learning things. But, you know, if you want a case in point of this, one of the leading scholars in the entire world on reading has just changed her entire mind about how you teach reading. She
and
did
such
that
an influential person.
Last week. She just said, everything I've been telling you for 20 years is wrong. And it's like, and the bravery to say everything I've said is probably not right anymore just shows you that you know, to summarily dismiss a 4-day school schedule because you love your job and because, especially, to be honest, and there's people that are going to hate me for saying it, but, like, you know, hardcore union people, for example, because that's where a lot of this, like, systematic change is super heavily opposed to by teachers unions. It is. It is. I don't care. At me, whatever. It is. And 5-day work weeks keep teachers employed more. It's true. Right? So
agreed.
You know, to oppose the idea is wrong. To suggest that because you've been because you've been teaching in a class for 10 years, you know the answer to this. I'm sorry, you don't. You know, the leading scholar on reading changed her mind after 20 years, and she had the bravery to admit that she was wrong. Yes. We can broach the topic of a 4-day schedule and whether that's right for kids, because frankly, we've only been doing this for about 100 years, and you know, we've been around for 10 or 20,000. So let's suggest let's be open to the suggestion that there might be other ways still, instead of, you know, settling so comfortably into the system that produced factory workers and infantrymen, and that was really the only purpose of education. It gave me the chance to say Prussian school system.
Oh, there you go.
So, you know, if you're looking for the OnEducation bingo card for this month, you can scratch off Prussian school system because
school system, and later in the episode you'll hear teachers pay teachers. So
so we nailed the OnEducation bingo card this week. So definitely worth, you know, not something to dismiss, and something we should keep talking about. Friends, when we come back, we're going to have an awesome conversation with Susanna Pollack from Games for Change, so stay with us. Welcome back to the podcast, everyone. Susanna Pollack is the president of Games for Change, an organization with a mission to empower game creators and social innovators to drive real-world change using games that help people to learn, improve their communities, and contribute to make the world a better place. They also organize the Games for Change conference held every summer. Welcome to the podcast, Susanna.
Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you. We're excited to talk about a special event happening in just a minute, but I suspect there might be some people listening today who just aren't familiar with Games for Change at all. Could you give us a little bit of the longer history on Games for Change and the conference and what type of work you guys do?
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. So Games for Change was founded, I guess 10 years before I even got involved. But in 2004, there was a small group of academics and researchers that were really interested in this idea that games could have a power beyond entertainment. There was a rising trend of not only young people, but people of all ages starting to play games, certainly with the advent of mobile, like the mobile phones, with casual games industry starting. But there was this idea, this belief that if games were designed intentionally to address social issues, whether it's education or raising awareness around some of the biggest problems we have today, that they actually could have tangible and measurable impact. So it was a grassroots community that started with 40 people in the basement of an office building, and over years grew into being a really vibrant community. And what's so interesting about it is that it continues to be cross-sector, because I think I mentioned at the beginning, I don't think anyone was actually a game designer who started the organization, but more and more the community grew into being not only accepted by the game design sector, but not-for-profits, foundations, government agencies, the education community, healthcare is an area which we're working a lot in right now, as well as like some of the largest NGOs and like foundations around the world. So we've been developing programs over the last 17 years, including the annual Games for Change Festival. And then over the last 10 years, I say 7 years since when I started getting involved, we started focusing a lot of our efforts in education, how games can be used in the classroom, how games can be used, just how game design itself could be educational. And the academic and the education community really responded well to this, and we've developed a number of terrific programs to support this development.
So one of the outcomes of the pandemic, we think, has been increased attention placed on the value of games in a remote experience. As an organization looking at games from a number of different angles, we're curious how you view things. How has the landscape for games changed in this past 8 to 10 months? And do you see the pandemic having a lasting impact on how we view games for learning going forward?
Yeah, I mean, this period over the last 10 months has been, it's been difficult on everyone, of course, for obvious reasons, but it also presented an interesting, as you say, like an interest and an appreciation for the sector that we've been working in and really trying to advocate, right, for the past 17 years, that games can actually have this positive impact on the communities and engage with them. And when we found ourselves isolated in quarantines, many people turned to playing games as a way to connect with people in their community, whether it was young people playing Minecraft or Call of Duty or Overwatch or whatever it might be. Fortnite is a place to connect with people, to connect with their friends that they couldn't see anymore, or connect with their relatives. So just as a place of convening, right, and connection, at its very roots, even in the commercial industry, that was showing value. But then as it connected with or had relevance with younger people, and within the education sector, there's a whole industry of games that have been designed for educational purposes. And we saw an increase of interest in this in these products and these experiences by the education community and by parents that were doing remote learning, as it was an obvious way to engage students in content and learning experiences in a way that they can do it from their dining room tables, or they can do it from their rooms. And it's been a very I say unanticipated outcome. I couldn't tell you that at the beginning of 2020, I would say this would be the year where everyone embraces games. But we have seen a tremendous level of interest, and I do think it will continue, right? Like once people's eyes open up to ways in which this form of entertainment can add value to our lives, I think, we're just going to only see that accelerate and evolve.
I was just thinking the other day, my son has taken an interest in world history, and it's kind of evolved over the pandemic kind of period here, and it reminded me, and any longtime listener of the podcast would know my love affair with Sid Meier's Civilization, and my fanboy adoration for Kurt Squire, and it's like thinking back to, I've said it a million times, I wouldn't be a teacher, I wouldn't be an educator if it was not for Sid Meier's Civilization. I 100% think that. And so I'm thinking about like my son now, and I'm like, dude, you need to play Civilization, my boy. Talk a little bit about the power of games to do that piece, especially commercial games, especially games that are kind of like you can just pick up off Steam and play. And they have this like formative, powerful, educational impact. There's lots of them out there. Sid Meier's Civilization is just one of them.
Yeah. I love Civilization, and I had like the most amazing opportunity to interview him a few years ago.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it was amazing.
I'm reading his book right now. It's so great.
Yeah, it's so great. So you're right. So Civilization, I guess right now it's like 27 years old. I think since the first Civ came out. And right. I mean, he will say that, it certainly wasn't developed to be an educational game, but the integrity and the insight that the developers, had in developing an experience that offered opportunities for people to think critically and to, be inspired to do research, to understand about the periods of history in which they were, building worlds within, right, has just tremendous impact. The reason that I interviewed him at the time was because they started actually working on an educational version of it that could formally build curriculum around a game that, as you said, inspired you so much and continues to inspire young people, as a way to make it easier for educators to bring it into the classroom, right? And that actually makes me think, because it is hard. It is hard to think about as an educator to think through, all right, how do I introduce this in a way that aligns with my curriculum, right? That will help me get to where I need to go in terms of what do I need to achieve with students over the year. But then you have studios like Ubisoft, and with a game like Assassin's Creed that I think has done, develop this passion for world history through playing this, right? This commercial game that also was made with historical researchers on the team, right? And is accurately.
We interviewed Maxime Durand, the game director.
He's amazing.
It was fantastic. He was on the podcast. Amazing. It was awesome.
I'd like to think that we played a small, like really tiny role in getting Ubisoft into the right frame of mind and corporately to allow focus and resources to go into creating an educational version of Assassin's Creed.
It's a risk.
Yeah, they came to our festival like 6 years ago, and we had a specific summit called Games for Learning Summit, which has evolved into a track at our event. And it was an opportunity for them to meet educators that had been modding the game for years, trying to figure out how do they bring this game into the classroom. And they were inspired. And 5 years later, they've released Discovery Tour, Ancient Egypt, and now Ancient Greece. And there are, structured ways in which educators to bring it in. And I just love that story because to me, that's a huge win for our organization to get this commercial AAA studio to realize that, you know what, there's like an opportunity and a responsibility, to use the medium that they've been developing and finding positive ways to impact the world.
I follow Maxime on Twitter, and he's been tweeting a lot about the Vikings and stuff like that. And I'm like, dude, you can't just tweet about the Vikings and not, we know what you're up to now, because obviously Valhalla's coming out. And it's like, and he also mentioned when we interviewed him, I remember he said, one of the things we did with the second one was we developed it kind of side by side. Mm-hmm. So they went from like taking a risk on that first one after the fact to being almost convinced, like absolutely bought into the idea that they needed to do this, the second one kind of almost at the same time. And you can definitely tell that the third one, the one that's not out yet, is totally, the third Discovery Tour is totally being developed because, Maxime is tweeting about the Vikings a lot. And that was like, yeah, man, it's coming. I'm so psyched about it. It's going to be amazing.
Great. Yeah. I mean, Ubisoft has really bought into the education opportunity. I mean, they also invested in creating a coding game, right? Out of Rabbids, right? Which they're releasing for free. Yeah. So it's fantastic when you have a AAA studio that says, we're going to lean into this space, because, we want to engage and have a positive impact.
Nice. So, Susanna, it's safe to say we're going through pretty turbulent times. That's like the understatement of the century. The U.S. specifically is continuing to tackle COVID-19 while also coming to grips with how they approach, racism in society. And an election, is just a couple weeks away. I've been saying for years that games have an incredible power to teach the tough stuff. And I think Games for Change would be ideally suited to leading a charge like that. How do you view the role of games when it comes to the tough stuff? And where do you think games could go as we move forward in these sort of narratives?
Well, one of the interesting things about games as a medium, which is different than other forms of traditional entertainment, is the sense of agency that players are given when they enter into a story, right? They can change the outcome of the story. They can step into someone else's shoes. They can fail and, respawn and try again. And all of that, just isn't possible in a linear narrative. And I think because you have that relationship with content, you're given like liberties to explore and make errors and model behavior, right? Mm-hmm. I think that's a really, really interesting thing, certainly in narrative games. A game like Life is Strange just has a tremendous appeal, in allowing people to explore, the issues that addresses. And then you have games like Plague. Right? Like Plague is like this awesome game that is, it wasn't created about the pandemic that we're in right now, nor was it about solving a pandemic. It inverts an issue into a very playful yet informative and ultimately educational approach, right? Like where you're a virus, right? And in the game Plague, and you are trying to infect the world, right? And just by inverting that puts people in a story in a way that's fun and exciting. That doesn't feel so heady. That doesn't feel like you are being taught to, right? They have this expression about chocolate covered broccoli. Anything in a Games for Change should be. So there are just some tremendous opportunities that we've seen in games to date that have addressed difficult issues, whether it's, refugee crisis or stories within world wars, that allow, people to feel like they're a step removed from the realities of any kind of hardship and given permission to play, explore, to role play and be part of the solution.
Mm-hmm. So we have an exciting announcement. Games for Change is sponsoring a STEM Your Game challenge where developers have all autumn through December 4th to submit their game, either in a final stage or a beta stage, and up to 3 winners will be selected and given up to $150,000.
It's a lot of money.
To use over the next 5 months to create a STEM learning version of their game. Tell us more about the STEM Your Game challenge, because this sounds amazing.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, we're really excited about this program. So, there are a lot of developers out there that are making educational games from the start, and I commend them, and we support that community, and I think there's some valuable and really effective games there. But what we're trying to do, though, is engage in a creative community that might not be thinking about the educational market. They are starting out as being just commercial game designers. They understand play. They are looking to make a successful game. And we are trying to engage more people into the space. So we put out this challenge, this thesis out there saying, do you have a game that you think that actually could be adapted into introducing or teaching middle schoolers in particular about STEM concepts? And if we paired you with an educator or curriculum developer to go inside your game and make tweaks, I mean, we're leaving it very open-ended about what exactly would need to be changed, or a lot, or not very much, and just build a curriculum around it. And see what, over that period of time, over the 5 months, with a little bit of resources or a lot of resources, and for us as Games for Change to bring the right expertise into that development team, right? To who understands the needs of middle schoolers, who understands games, but understands how, information and material would need to be presented, and pair that as a partnership with the creatives, right? With those designers who understand play and the developers who know how to make an engaging game. Can we then reintroduce that game within the educational market, both in twofold? One, we really want and will need that for there to be a free educational version. We want these games that come out of this program to be able to reach kids regardless of where they are and their and their school system's economic status. But then there's an opportunity too for these developers to see if there is an opportunity to develop a business model around a consumer version, right? Think about something that parents might want to buy for their kids as well. So yeah, it's a bit of an experiment, but something that we feel excited about. And I can tell you that from the initial reaction that we're getting from developers about this opportunity, there's a lot of interest, and it's really, really exciting.
I bet. So how can people connect with you online, learn more about Games for Change or the STEM Your Game challenge? Yeah,
so on our website, which is gamesforchange.org, right there, smack in the middle of our landing page, is a link where you can learn more, the guidelines and the requirements about, what we're looking for, and with the stage in which we want, we will need your game to be developed. We're not looking for an early concept or a prototype. We are looking for games and studios that have a game that have been produced up to a certain point. So you can see about the guidelines through there. And then you can always email us at contact@gamesforchange.org if you have some specific questions.
Awesome. Susanna Pollack, thanks so much for joining us.
Oh, it's been my pleasure. And I hope we get to come again sometime in the future.
Thanks for listening to OnEducation. My name is Glenn Irvin. My co-host is Mike Washburn. OnEducation is part of the On Podcast Media Network. You can listen to this show and many others by great educators like Monica Burns, Mike Matera, Tisha Richmond, and many more by visiting onpodcastmedia.com. Want to get in touch with us? Check out our website, oneducationpodcast.com. You can tweet us at OnEducationPod. Mike is at Mr. Washburn on Twitter, and I can be found on Twitter at IrvSpanish. You can find us on Facebook by visiting facebook.com/OnEducationPod. We're also on Instagram at OnEducationPod. If you're enjoying the show and think others would too, we would be thrilled if you shared it with them. please leave us a rating or review in Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts. When you leave a rating, it gives our rankings a boost. This helps others discover the show. We want to thank our presenting sponsor, Participate, for supporting us. Check out participate.com to learn more about them. Thanks as always for listening. Stay awesome and see you soon.